Hi, and welcome to PowerViews. I'm Dan McDade, your host and president of PointClear. PowerViews is a show dedicated to finding solutions to some of today's toughest marketing and sales challenges. My guest today is Tim Riesterer. Tim's responsible for the strategic direction at Corporate Visions, including thought leadership, positioning, and product development. Tim has more than 20 years' experience in marketing and sales. Prior to joining Corporate Visions, Tim co-founded Customer Message Management, LLC, where he was CEO until it was acquired by Corporate Visions in 2008. Prior to moving into other executive management roles, Tim worked in marketing, communications, and sales support for world-class technology manufacturers, including Rockwell Automation and GE Medical Systems. Tim is co-author of Customer Message Management, Increasing Marketing's Impact on Selling, which is a Thomson AMA publication, and Conversations That Win the Complex Sale, Using Power Messaging to Create More Opportunities, Differentiate Your Solution, and Close More Deals, which is McGraw-Hill. Tim's degree is in Mass Communications and Journalism from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and he lives in the Milwaukee area with his wife and 4 daughters, and he enjoys singing and acting. And Tim, I hope you don't mind my adding to that. This is something probably most people don't know, that you've been singing publicly in quartet since 1982 when you were part of an award-winning high school barbershop quartet. That group expanded into country quartet singing and became known as Forever, and I know you have a group since then called, I can't remember, Eternity, I'm sorry.
We're not very creative when it comes to names.
And Forever appeared across the state of Wisconsin. You made 3 original single records and opened for acts such as the Oak Ridge Boys, Loretta Lynn, and Roy Clark, some of my favorite people. So that's something that folks don't know about you. But Tim, welcome to PowerViews.
Well, thanks for having me, Dan. And if it's important to have some sort of secret divulged about your life to be on this show, I guess now I'm there.
I always try to find that. So let me start out just with a general question, and that is, what has either happened or not happened in 2012 so far that has surprised you?
You know, the thing that's surprised me is we're still seeing, so the economy hasn't been great news, but we're still seeing a lot of activity out there. I think lead gen and sales activity is still up, and so we're seeing activity levels still be high, and we're still seeing we're getting the at-bats that we want as marketing and salespeople with our prospects and customers. The bigger challenge I do see, though, is that the no decision threat, the threat to not do anything, even though they want to squeeze you for all the information you've got, is looming large and seems to only be expanding. So we're getting more opportunities to have conversations, but we're not necessarily closing anymore, and that's kind of the painful part of what I see going on right now.
Yeah, I won't divulge the name of the prospect, but I was talking to a company yesterday, and they said, we're going with Corporate Visions to do this, that, and the other thing. So you got one in the wings here that's coming pretty close.
Great.
Yeah, historically, there's been a disconnect between marketing and sales. You know, we talk about sales alignment, and how would you recommend that companies continue to build on bridging that gap between marketing and sales?
Well, you have to find something concrete. And I think really for the last 5-6 years or so, that effort's been focused on lead generation and lead scoring and nurturing and service level agreements, SLAs, between marketing and sales. So you manage the handoffs, you manage the recycling, and that's all good. And I think that was concrete and people focused on it. The new place we see marketing and sales coming together is this area of enabling salespeople, and that's more focused on the conversations and presentations they have. When a salesperson gets a lead, that's all well and good. They know where to show up, but at some point then their lips have to move. And are they saying things in a high quality, consistent manner that consistently puts your company's best foot forward and has the impact you're looking for, or are these things happening more by accident? So a very purposeful focus on the messages that are developed, the tools and assets that they're put in, and then the skills development of salespeople to have distinguishing conversations that use all that content. I think that's the new frontier for alignment after having sort of got that lead handoff thing a little bit more in shape.
Yeah, and there are some companies that would say, well, they're not sure about that lead handoff thing either. But
No, I'm not saying anybody. That's why I said it's kind of in shape. I would agree that that is still a sticking point, but there's probably 2 points of alignment. the lead gen, demand gen, and the content sales enablement messaging piece. Those are your two focal points, I believe, in alignment.
Yeah, absolutely agree. How about demand generation tips? What would you recommend that companies do to increase their sales leads?
I think the new wave of demand gen is going to be sort of out with the white papers and analyst reports and all those heavy text things, and in with video-oriented content. Video speaks to the part of the brain you want to appeal to in demand gen. It's what's called the old brain, the primal brain, and it doesn't have capacity for language. It has visual, emotional stimulus that it craves. So video is important from the standpoint of demand gen is appealing to the decision-making part of the brain activated by visuals, not necessarily words, number one. And number two, the vehicles or channels, smartphones, tablets, that people are consuming content on are optimized for video. So video, as opposed to traditional PDF types of demand gen tools, I think that's the real sort of turning point we're at right now. So people have to figure out how to create visually sort of stimulating content that creates urgency and shows enough contrast visually to see why people should do something different.
And I guess the carriers are picking up on that too, because they all want to charge us more for data. It seems like
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the carriers were a little bit surprised by how much data was consumed, and so they're now figuring out that cha-ching, the data's going to not dwindle, and so they're going to be able to tax it essentially. Yeah, we need it. They're going to be able to go after it, supply and demand.
A recent report that I think I may have seen on your site found that only 40% of sales leads end in a decision to go with a new solution or provider, and I think the question that you ask is, what do we have to do to get the other 60% into that making a decision? What do you suggest there?
Well, I think the most painful part of that stat is it's not 40% of all sales leads. It's actually 40% of qualified pipeline. So what that means is 6 out of 10, 60% of qualified pipe is going to no decision. So that means all this activity, all these engagements, all these resources applied, and 6 out of 10 times, the majority of times, people say, I think I'm still okay. So what people have to think about is, well, what's going wrong in the sales cycle if people who thought they had a problem got to the end of the sales cycle and decided, I'm still okay? I think it's incumbent on the company to say, they came to us for a reason, they thought they had an issue, we let them off the hook. So you have to frame a conversation that says not only, why should you pick us? Well, 6 out of 10 times, people don't care yet. They're trying to figure out why change. Mm-hmm. So you have to improve your ability to help unseat or loosen the status quo and convince people it's time to do something different before you can convince them to choose you. And most messaging, most conversations, even most demand gen content skips that whole part. And no wonder people are ending at the end going, you all sound the same, I think I'm okay. Yeah. So applying yourself to that why change, why now conversation is so important, and people tend to skip over it because they can't wait to talk about themselves.
Yeah. I talk about the 5 stages in a sales cycle being finding a pain, getting agreement that there's pain, agreeing to do something about the pain, agreeing to a generic solution, and then agreeing to a customized specific solution. And unfortunately, most salespeople want to start at step 5 and derails the whole process.
Absolutely. And companies... Because companies love their own story, they think everybody else will. Mm-hmm. And they can't wait to tell it because they're excited about it. And they just don't do the deliberate diligence of getting through exactly as you described it. And I think the problem is that we often say salespeople need to do that, and the company actually doesn't create any messaging to support that. They just say, well, that's just good salesmanship, discovery and agreement. No, you actually have to build stories for the front part of the buying cycle or sales cycle that include the why change discussion, and build stories for the why us discussion, which we're pretty proficient at. We just, again, missed that first part. And if you have a gap, people will tend to skip it. They have nothing to say.
Absolutely. Hey, we are amazingly at the beginning of the second half of 2012. It seems like yesterday we were entering 2012. What do you suggest that companies look at for the balance of this year to both, optimize 2012, also keeping in mind that there's going to be a 2013, and they have to be mindful of that as well?
Yeah, I think companies have to do that. They have to take a look at their story and say, have we erred on the side of leading with our story instead of leading with the customer story and what needs to change? As one big point that I'm thinking about here for companies. We like to call it, you have to find your distinct point of view. Customers are inundated by information, so the trajectory of information is going up so fast, and it's in direct proportion against the ability to process information. So there's this gap in between that I like to call the meaning gap. People have to make meaning, and too much of what we're doing is just overloading the marketplace with too much information. And so there's this we need more content because there's more channels for content. And the problem is the customer's like, I got enough content, I just can't make sense of it. So companies have to get in the business of not more content. They have to recognize that people can't process it. So they got to be in the business of making meaning. Find your voice, develop a distinct point of view, and add value that way to the marketplace, and people will start to gravitate towards you. And that's the challenge. Not just more content on what you do. Make meaning for people and make sense of it all so people can actually form decisions.
I had Tony Jaros on the show a week or so ago, and I think he suggested something that your company could really help with, and that is having companies kind of cluster the prospects together that are sort of birds of a feather. And what they'll find is there's probably 60 or 80% of them that fall into just a few groups,
right.
And then develop something that's going to enable the sales force to have more success the rest of this year, as opposed to just going out there with that generic message that you're talking about.
Well, absolutely. We sometimes try to cluster people by titles and personas. My argument, and it supports what Tony said, is group them by status quo. Because the thing you're trying to defeat is the status quo, and the status quo is, what do they have installed today? What processes and systems are they using to make it work today? And why do they think they're safe? And where are they not safe? And by defining people by how they're doing it, how old their stuff is, what their process is, you can start to picture a message that will appeal to that status quo. So using status quo clusters, scenario type clusters, and then messaging to their situation, not to their title. Because just because they have that title doesn't mean they're ready to buy. Mm-hmm. They might be ready to buy because they live in this status quo, and their status quo is not getting them where they want to go. So clustering and defining as your design point for your messaging and demand gen, the status quo you're attacking, and your best story relevant to that status quo is what we're recommending for companies.
Well, I think that's spot on. Well, what have we missed today? What else would you like to pass along to the audience?
Well, the idea here is that, if you're a marketing person or a salesperson who's listening to this effort to make this happen is a joint effort. Too many companies use what I like to call the ta-da method of creating a great story for the marketplace. A couple people get in a small room, they think they're very clever, and they come out and they go, ta-da! Don't you love it? And we prefer what we call a fingerprints on the gun method, where you have representation, cross-functional representation from the people who have to carry the message and deliver it and move their lips in front of a customer, and the smart subject matter experts in the same room coalescing and coming to an agreement on what's the most powerful, provocative message in the room that represents our strengths and is defensible in the marketplace, and actually, I like to say, passes the snicker test. What that means is, can a salesperson say it without snickering? And too often our marketing content is built in such an ivory tower that we say things that sound clever in an ad or on some sort of marketing piece, and a salesperson could never deliver that with a straight face. It just doesn't make sense in those 3-foot level conversations like it makes sense in the 30,000-foot conversation. So cross-functional representation to build your story is so important, and to alignment, because the experience is good, but to the outcome and output as well.
Yeah, I bet you and your wife do what my wife and I do. We'll sit there next to each other watching a television show, and we'll see a commercial, and we'll go, what? How could they have come up with that?
Yeah, what were you thinking, and at the end of the day, what were you trying to sell or accomplish with that? We've used clever as our new technique for good messaging, and there's so much more brain science behind decision-making than just being clever. And I'm afraid we just get lazy and we try to out-clever each other and don't have a story to really tell.
I think that ties into what I was going to suggest the audience take a look at. And in just a moment, I'll ask you to maybe provide some contact information should folks want to get in touch with you. But you do have an on-demand webinar called Differentiating Your Message in the Tech Sector, and I'm sure it's probably applicable to other sectors as well. But I was really interested in that because it's something that people can just go onto your website right now and watch this and hear you talk about this very issue. But how else can folks reach out to you and if they have a question, or maybe you can point them to the website, how do you want folks to reach out to you?
Yeah, one of the exciting things is we're taking this whole issue of messaging to another level. We're having an entire conference on this. We're expecting 20 different companies to speak. The agenda is shaping up. So if you go to our website, corporatevisions.com, you'll see a big promotion for the Sales and Marketing Messaging Conference. And you'll see the companies that are presenting, and they're all going to tell their story about how they're trying to make marketing sales work better together, with the focal point being on messaging. So that's an asset and an opportunity that's coming up this September. But meanwhile, the website is chock full of instant webcasts from 3 minutes to 30 minutes, and on subjects such as alignment, subjects such as differentiation, subjects such as the status quo and how you can break through it. So we're not afraid to basically share all the secret sauce in terms of what we do and how people can apply it. And then, of course, you'll also find out you can find the book, Conversations That Win the Complex Sale, where literally chapter by chapter we articulate another technique for bringing your message to life in a way that really resonates.
Well, this is Dan McDade with Tim Riesterer from Corporate Visions. Tim, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for the opportunity, Dan. Thank you.
For now, this is Dan McDade signing off from PowerViews. Thanks for watching.